Steve Darrow has a question for us. He says, to stay on tonight's topic, in your series for Turning Point USA, will you devote a piece to how do you know you are right? You've touched on this a number of times in bits and pieces, but I thought it would be good to have a single segment where you discuss the critical thinking process and the steps you go to determine what is right, which is a great lead into a question that I got that I'll deal with in a minute. Here's a great example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. We did a show a couple weeks ago where Scott basically said that New York Times did a report, and I went, oh, okay, here it comes. But it was a report from the Heritage Foundation that said that the kind of voter fraud that we consider to be the one that we're worried about, people going in to vote without IDs and multiple voting and illegals voting, Heritage has looked at this very, very carefully, apparently, and said to say it doesn't happen is obviously nuts, and 300 million people, something's going to happen. But it is literally a handful, 10 or less, provable cases in the last 8 years or something. And so to go to your issue about when do I know I'm right, I know I'm right when I hear something that goes against what I believe, and I dredge myself out of what I want to believe into what appears to be true. I loved, as I said on that show, I loved my voter ID. And by the way, I haven't changed my mind on voter ID, but I loved the idea of thinking that that this voter fraud was that prevalent. I remember Acorn. I remember all of this stuff. And it turns out that it's one of the things that probably just isn't so. And so I'm not gonna stand on that ground anymore. If somebody provides a really compelling case that it is actually there, then I'll take a look at that report, and I'll weigh it against the Heritage report, and we'll see which one smells most like the truth. But that's really the process, is just simply understanding that sometimes you have an emotional reaction to, in fact, all the time nowadays, because our whole society is so politicized, you have an emotional reaction to this kind of a news thing, and you don't want to change, but I would rather be right. So it's a difficult thing to get in the habit of. One of the things that is always keeps me honest is if something sounds too good to be true, then almost certainly it's not true. But the effort to find the truth is what I do, and I spend a lot of time on it. And when I mess up, which doesn't happen too often, I'm not trying to brag, it's just I'm very careful. When I do mess up, and just even a little thing wrong, even if I get a spelling error wrong, it just follows me for days. I said Leon Panetta instead of John Podesta on the last Firewall I did, I think. And I just came in, re-recorded it, recut it, re-edited it. It was just a terrible mistake. But they happen sometimes. I think the deeper question, obviously, Steve, is, in the world, how do you know something is right? Well, there's a couple ways to do that. One of them is to use common sense. Here's the part that's actually interesting, I think, on this issue. And I owe this to the late, great Stephen Denbest, I think. I didn't really understand this, but apparently this is how it works. The HAL 9000 was the programmed, never mind. Heuristically programmed analog something or other. Forget that. It was Steve Denbest that talked to me about the idea of heuristics. Now, there are so many people, whenever I talk about anything on this show, I've always got many people, and most of them are watching live, who know more about this than I do, a lot more. So this is not an area where my knowledge is terribly deep, but as I understand it, we function, our intellects function, and our behavior systems, and our morality, and our world outlook, all of that is learned heuristically. And again, as I understand it, a heuristic is an argument that is a heuristic is a building block of data that you don't have to keep retesting. And a great example of this would be if you are young or old and you put your hand and you see a glowing orange stove top, the old coil ones, and it's glowing red hot. If you touch that, you don't have to touch it every single time it comes on to learn that it's hot. You learn it one time. You build in your head a heuristic, and the heuristic basically says glowing red burner hot. And if you've got enough intelligence, you may actually use that information usefully and translate that into glowing red anything hot. And so you start to build this kind of a worldview based on the things that you know to be true. Now, down at the low level, virtually everybody has the same heuristics. Virtually, there's not many people out there who don't understand that if you touch something that's red hot, you're going to get burned. It's something we just learn. But as these things get more and more complex, then they start to drift away from the actual evidence. So sometimes you have to just look at the structure of what you believe, not just the data points, not just one particular issue, but how they all work together, how they all match. And I could just give you an example here, because this, by happy coincidence, was just put on my desk by Carla when I came in back after my meeting here before the show.